Welcome to Liesl's Artistic Studio, my friends. I'm so excited for today because I'm going to share all of my secrets and painting tips on how easy it is to paint this loose, transparent flower. Let's go ahead and just jump right into it here. Now, besides watercolor paints and a paper towel, we need watercolor paper. Now, it is of course an option to paint this in more of a free-handed way, but I do find it helpful to have some sort of guide or outline, so I have created one to share with you that I will put on my Etsy shop if you're interested in using mine. Now, this looks a lot more complicated than it actually is. I've got a lot of lines drawn on here, but don't let that frighten you. There are really just a few main lines that you need to focus on, and that is the darker lines here, which are just the main petal shapes that form each individual petal, as well as the overall flower shape as a whole. All of these smaller lines are really just optional. These are just some fun vein lines to add a little bit of character to the piece. You can draw them in or you can leave them off and just freehand paint those in later. If you get this outline from my Etsy shop, which I will leave a link to in the description of the video, all you have to do is download, print it off, and then simply trace it onto your watercolor paper using a light table or even just a well-lit window in your house. And as hopefully you can see here, I mostly just drew on the outer petal shapes with just a few of the vein lines. I plan to paint most of those in free-handed, but it also just makes it look a little bit less complicated and confusing if you use fewer of them. So that just makes it easier to follow along with. I'll go ahead and tape my paper down with some artist tape really quickly to help with some of the warping, and then we can get to painting. Okay, good enough. Let's just pull out a few brushes and then we can get started. I think I might use a few of my Craftamo brushes for this piece today. Let's try maybe the large number 10 round, the small number 3 round, and the number 1 rigger. Now, at the moment, these brush sets are sold out, but something exciting is coming up soon, maybe in just 1 or 2 months even, and that is my Craftamo monthly watercolor class subscription boxes. The good news is I have some very similar sizes of these that I just pulled out coming out in those subscription boxes. In fact, let me pull those out really quickly just to show you a slight adjustment I made with these. With the subscription brushes, I actually made these same sized brushes just slightly longer in length. Here's the number 10 brush comparison for both. I will also show the number 3 comparison as well. When I started creating the subscription brushes, I needed to make all of the round sizes gradually adjust in width as well as length so that they all worked out proportionately with each other and that all of the sizes in between fit. And I didn't exactly have to do that with just my little brush box, so in the end, that made some of the brushes slightly longer with the subscription. But the good news is both types work terrifically. I have personally designed and tested them all out, and I approve of them very much. I will leave a link for my Craftamo supplies in the description of this video if you're interested in being notified when they become available. All right, that's enough of that. Now, you can choose whatever colors you'd like for this pretty little flower. I haven't painted a blue/purple flower for quite a while, so that is what I chose to do today. I'm going to be doing a touch of color mixing, so I do have just a small scrap piece of paper that I can try out some colors on if I need to. I think I will start with a little bit of mineral violet here first. This is more of a red-violet color. Then I'll also have some pure dioxazine purple over here, and down below I'll mix up a little bit of blue violet by mixing some dioxazine purple with just a touch of ultramarine blue. I'll just do a few quick color swatches so you can see what we've got going on here, but these are very pretty colors and they should work well together because this is actually what is called an analogous color scheme, meaning that these are colors right next to each other on the color wheel. Now, to start off, let's take the large number 10 round brush and just take a touch of water and spread a water layer throughout one of the petals. Now, I do have a small amount of some watered down paint within the bristles, so this is going to add a light valued purple color for a nice background layer. And then we'll use the wet on wet technique in just a minute to slowly add more color throughout this as well. All right, now that I have a good amount of water down as a base layer, I'll take just a touch more color. Maybe I'll try some of the mineral violet first, but really you have the freedom here to use any color combinations you'd like. Like I say, all of these colors go really well with each other, so it really doesn't matter what you choose to try. I'll just add a small amount of this purple to a few spots on the petal just to add a bit of dimension in here. And if you'd like, you can even paint in some stripes or strips of color that can represent some very soft and blended vein lines in the background as well. I think I will add just a touch more color on the ends of the petals just to create a little bit more of a contrast in values. All right, now that background coloring looks pretty good. So I'll switch over to the number 3 round brush and take a darker, more concentrated paint. Maybe I'll try out some of the Dioxazine purple. And then I'll use that color to just paint along the outer edge of that background layer of color. And really, I'm painting this on pretty quickly. It doesn't have to be exact, but what's fun about this technique is that it sort of creates a dark area around the edge of the petal, which in turn gives it sort of a transparent effect. There are a couple of things to keep in mind here though. That initial base layer of water and color still needs to be wet for this to work well. The idea here is to paint this darker outer edge line so that it touches both the wet area of color as well as some of the dry paper at the same time. The paint that touches the wet side will naturally blend or blur slightly into that wet space, making a really nice soft gradient of color. And the paint touching more of the dry side of the paper will create more of a hard edge or line of color, creating a darker, more finished off look. And really, that is the basic idea to this overall piece. Now, you, of course, have the freedom to add more vein lines onto the petals, use a different combination of colors from one petal to the next, and even play around with different values to change things up here and there. I do recommend skipping every other petal as you paint though, so that each petal has a chance to dry before you start overlapping petal layers. Otherwise, they will all just blend and bleed into each other, and we really want the look of them to be more separate to help keep that transparent vibe. But at this point, I'll just continue on in the same manner, so feel free to follow along with me or try out your own ideas. I'm just the guide, but you are the artist for your work. I hope you're enjoying the tutorial so far. I really try to provide fun and achievable paintings so that anyone feels like they can do it, no matter their skill level. If you find you are enjoying my painting and teaching style, I hope you'll subscribe if you haven't already so you don't miss out on any of my new and upcoming weekly tutorials. All right, we have got a good portion of this flower done. Now, at this point, I really want all of these petals to be completely dry before I begin painting the layers of petals over the top. So you can just take a quick break if you want to allow it to dry more naturally, but I am feeling a little bit impatient today, so I think I'll speed up the process by using a hairdryer. Okay, now that the painting is completely dry, I can continue on painting in the rest of the petals in the same way as we've been doing. I think I will start using maybe some darker paint on the next few petals to also change up things a little bit. Something else I might mention here is just to be careful not to rub the water or your bristles too much on those base layers of color, or it may start to lift off some of that paint, which will in turn potentially make some of those outer darker edge lines not look quite so crisp. But don't worry, if this happens to you, there is a way to fix that in just a minute, so stick around and I will walk you through that issue. Awesome job. Doesn't that look so neat? Now I think I'll go ahead and pull out the hairdryer once again to speed up this drying process so that I can move on to the last couple of steps. Now, most of my lines still look pretty good even after painting over them, but if you happen to have some soften a little bit or you need to fix some, or maybe you just feel like some need to be a little more crisp, all you have to do is take a touch of darker concentrated paint on the very tip of your small number 3 round brush and just paint in a very thin line of color. Now, you don't need a lot here. You really do want to keep it thin so as not to overpower the overall look of the piece. Just a hint to sort of crisp up that line a little bit. All right, moving on, the last little detail to finish off the look of these petals, I will be painting in a few more very thin vein lines onto the petals. Now, you may have chosen to add in a few lines of color along here earlier when the paint was still a little bit wet. And because it was damp, it made those lines more spread out and soft looking. So the ones I add in now are going to be more crisp. But if you feel like that's enough for your flower, you absolutely don't have to add in more if you don't want to. I do want the ones that I add in to be very, very thin though. So I will pull out my small rigger brush for this. I'll just take a touch of color. Really, any of these colors will work, so you can be the judge here. And then I also have placed off to the side of my table the outline drawing so that I can use it as a potential guide as to where or how many lines I'd like to throw in here. But you know, a lot of this is just going to be with your own eye and your own judgment. Put in what you feel like your painting needs, but again, keep them nice and thin so they don't overrun the flower. This should just be an accent to the overall look, not the main focus. Okay, now you may have noticed that I kind of just painted the base layer of color around the stamen area of the flower. And before I paint those in, I think I'd like to add a touch more dark color in underneath them. I'll just add a little bit of Payne's Gray to this mix of blue-violet here on my tray to make it a hint darker. And then using the number 3 round, I'll take a small amount of water and paint that within this area. After there's a touch of water on here and it's a little bit wet, I'll go ahead and drop in some of this nice dark color that we just mixed up and let that blend and bleed throughout this bottom space. I think while I'm at it, I'll go ahead and just quickly paint in the small stem that I have in here too. I'll just take a touch of this olive green color and maybe add some dioxazine purple in the mix to help it match the other colors I've got going on here. Then I'll paint this in sort of the same way as I did with the petals of the flower. I'll paint a light base layer or watery layer of this color on the stem first, and then I'll take some of the darker, more concentrated mix on the tip of my brush and paint that along the outside edges, continuing on with that transparent feel. Now, the very last part to this painting is just finishing off the stamen area of the flower. I'll try some yellows and oranges for this part. Maybe I'll pull out a bit of azo yellow for the base layer of color and then mix a tiny bit of gamboge into some alizarin crimson that I already have on my tray for a nice, rich orange color. I'll go ahead and paint on the base layer of azo yellow first, and then while that color is still a little bit wet, I'll take a touch of the orange color that we mixed up and paint that in along the bottom areas of the stamen. That looks pretty good, but I actually feel like I need to add just a touch more of this color on the tops of these stamen pieces. Maybe I'll just try blending in a little bit of gamboge. I think that's a little bit better. That extra color just helps it stand out a little bit more. And that, my friends, is it for today's painting. I hope you enjoyed this piece. It really wasn't super hard to do, and it is a lot of fun. If you did enjoy this tutorial, I hope you'll consider subscribing to my channel so I can continue to help you discover your artistic side.